You see this frickin' tree in my front yard? You see this frickin' monstrosity? We got gravel. 17,000 acorns. You're walking out here. Ting, 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 ting. You need a fucking helmet. It's like you're getting shot at by a fucking BB gun. Ting, 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 ting.
Welcome back, Joe Matarese, the gift that keeps on giving. As one of recent time's most trolled entertainers, you could forgive the aspiring Dago Joe Matarese for taking some much needed time away from the internet. In the months following his catastrophic appearance on Compound Media's short-lived Artie and Anthony show, the washed-up Philadelphian was done. Following what he deemed legitimate threats, Joe began the long overdue process of detaching himself from the never-ending waves of online torment. His previously frantic Twitter activity would dwindle to the occasional plug or inconsequential retweet. Finally, Joe had found a formula that worked. The struggling jester would spend the late spring of 2018 as a modest touring comic on the outskirts of obscurity, making a quick buck wherever he could.
Rocky! What brings you to the comedy club tonight, Rocky?
It was also at this time that Joe would wrap up his most recent podcasting venture, Stand Up, Lie Down. This after recording 10 largely forgettable episodes to a handful of mildly interested boomers. The podcast featured former Howard Stern psychologist and hairless pundit Dr. Keith Abloh and ran from January to April 2018. The project was heavily spammed on Joe's new Stand Up Lie Down Twitter account, although the emergence of various soccer accounts with similar names rendered this approach moot. Still, for lumpy neck-bearded superfan Gerald Rowan, the excitement of the project was simply too much to express in words. In a stroke of serendipitous fortune, Joe had found the show's theme song.
So listen up, gather round, stand up, lie down.
Despite Keith Abloh's addition seen as a coup by an oblivious Joe, the outspoken doctor's media profile was marred by hateful controversy. Dr. Abloh's vicious insistence that children should be forcibly prevented from watching transgender mutant Chaz Bono on television drew outrage across mainstream media, with waspy hag Megyn Kelly particularly critical.
Do you really believe that children are going to turn transgender from watching Chaz Bono?
I really believe, Megan, and there's plenty of data, that we kindle behavior in one another.
The psychiatrist's comments on homosexuality further prompted pudgy kebab fanatic Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks to further castigate the controversial hate speaker.
This is narcissistic. I feel like it, so I'm going to do it, no matter what the science might show, and we need the data. But the bottom line is, how did we decide that kids are just fine to grow up absent their biological parents?
And by the way, how is it narcissistic to say, hey, you know what? I am going to structure my life around taking care of other human beings that no one else has stepped up to take care of.
But it was Dr. Abloh's comments on the Holocaust that would cause most concern for the academic slaphead. In a bizarre piece blaming Jews for their own wartime predicament, he rambled how it was a bad idea for any Jew to have turned over a gun. It was a bad idea for any Jew to have boarded a train. It was a bad idea for any Jew to have passed through a gate into a camp.
I mean, if you don't fight back against the Nazis, and then you get a Holocaust, that's what happens.
The podcast itself was largely uneventful, with more of the same self-indulgent introspection as heard on Fixing Joe, albeit this time with the assistance of an anti-Semitic homophobe.
Do you want Henry Kissinger to call you? I'm like, yeah.
Yeah,
And it
I would
happens.
like that, and it happens. He's not what those Italians always sound like they're bullshit.
No,
and
yeah,
then it
that's
comes
right.
through.
During the opening months of 2018, Joe's entrepreneurial creativity would once again rear its foolish head, with a new zany take on performance art, his most recent in a long line of misguided ventures. With Anything But Your Act, unknown comedians were encouraged to entertain the audience using talents and abilities outside their usual skill sets. And with the wild success of the Goddamn Comedy Jam, a live event showcasing the musical abilities of well-known comedians such as Bill Burr, Mark Maron and Jim Jeffries, Joe's vision for a similar concept for East Coast comedians had all the best intentions. Unfortunately for Joe, nobody knew or cared enough about his uninspiring roster of career middles to be interested in their other so-called talents. Much like your typical karaoke, the shows would play out as some awkward display of self-aggrandizing cringe, with overcompensating performers having far more fun than the handful of bemused bar stragglers watching. Even with Joe's signature Tony Soprano impression, Anything But Your Act could only muster a crowd in the single digits. This would plant yet another checkmark in Joe's infamous loss column, as yet another ambitious scheme failed to gain traction.
I think we're on page 4, Tony. It's a side effect of the dyslexia. You forget what page you're on.
Sure. Yeah, if I line of work being happy all the fucking time,
that's right.
That's where I am. I said it's like a fucking boxer. What do you have, the whole fucking script?
On the subject of bad impersonations, the beginning of 2018 also saw Joe's Twitter activity engulfed in a series of face swap videos. The final surge of hopped up lunacy in the run-up to Joe's self-imposed social media ban saw the self-titled humorist digitally replace his own face with those of his idols. As expected, Tony Soprano and Danone from Fast Times at Richmond High would each feature heavily, despite being culturally redundant in 2018.
Watching the fucking TV, fucking wanting the Eagles to win, and I'm gonna have to go on fucking stage in like fucking 4 minutes. And then I'm gonna miss the fucking end of this fucking game. Phenomenal. Fucking trying to watch it here. Fucking 15 to 10.
But it was Joe's overwhelming fixation with Stallone's Rocky films that had freefalled his obsessive descent to bizarre new lows. The face swaps would represent a tip of an autistic iceberg, as Joe's all-encompassing desire to live for just a moment in the skin of a fictional boxer took complete control.
Hey, how you doing? I mean, this is in response to what you guys are saying about these videos. You don't like them, or you think they're a waste of time, and I feel like I enjoy this, so that's why I do it.
In February 2018, Joe Matarese's compulsive yearning to actually become Rocky Balboa extended to portraying Stallone's character in a fully costumed production with a paid actress. And although much of this was simply a cheap grab at social media buzz in the run-up to the Philadelphia Eagles Super Bowl win, such an undying affection for the film franchise is certainly strange for a man of his age.
You ever fly Spirit?
No.
Oh, it's like a bus with wings. Yeah, it's not nice at all. I mean, they don't give you a movie, no food, none of those little pretzels, none of those biscotti cookies, you know, those little cinnamon things. You like those, right?
I love those.
Yeah, those are good.
Joe's middle-aged fascination with his iPhone's face swap application continued to generate increasingly disturbing results. Having already cycled through the so-called big guns in his impression arsenal, the narcotized father of two's hero imitation soon infiltrated the world of stand-up comedy, with Joe tagging far more successful comedians with his own personal and outlandish likeness.
This is what it looks like when you mix my face with Joe Matarese's. Hey, it's Sebastian Maniscalco. How are you? Checking in from Joe Matarese's house in New Rochelle.
Louis C.K., Jim Florentine and Sebastian Maniscalco would each receive the Joe Matarese treatment, albeit to little effect. Ultimately, these face swap videos packed little comedic punch, and whilst impersonation is a valid component in comedy, this Rupert Pupkin-esque courtship of far more successful peers, having persistently tweeted them a plethora of bad impressions, is by all accounts desperate.
So AJ, what the fuck? How'd you do on the fucking podcast?
It was perfect. It was wonderful.
Hey, did you fucking make me look bad? I mean, I'm not here anymore, but I fucking still looking over you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Following torrents of criticism for his early 2018 pursuits, primarily from a mixture of Red Bar Radio subscribers and the O&A subreddit community, a raging Joe went on the offensive. His ongoing feud with Red Bar host Mike David saw Joe tweet a picture of Mike on stage with the caption, "It all makes sense now," before a second tweet with the comment, "And this is the guy you choose to follow and make your hero." Joe was visibly rattled, and having smelt blood, Red Bar fans began to close in. Inevitably, the line between trolling and genuine abuse became somewhat blurred, as a Twitter account by the name of Woodward of AZ took what was essentially light trolling up several notches. He first tweeted to African-American comedian Danielle Williams, claiming in jest that Joe had referred to her as a chubby hack, before another tweet suggesting Joe himself would need tough security at an upcoming gig in Phoenix, Arizona. Woodward of AZ was subsequently banned and disavowed from the Red Bar community, before a tweet of his surfaced apologising to the comedy club and to Danielle Williams. His original tweets were arguably nothing more than attempts at shock-style humour gone too far. But either way, Joe had seen enough. He would tweet no more. Joe's self-imposed ban on social media lasted far longer than expected, and after an unusually quiet summer for the plastic Italian, the trolls had all but disappeared. After years of endlessly batting away throngs of amused shitposters, it looked as though Joe Matarese had finally learned not to engage. The break seemed to do wonders for Joe on a personal level too, with the almost comedian even trying his hand at antique furniture restoration, namely repainting an early 1900s dresser. And with that shabby chic redesign a favourite amongst culturally inept suburban thots, Joe stood to make a small fortune. The ambitious handyman originally priced the piece at $1,100, although this has since been revised to $850 due to a general lack of interest in decrepit lumps of shit. The appearance of a working comedian flogging old furniture in tweets sandwiched between show plugs and sycophantic retweets only emphasises the incessant struggle of a man who once readily admitted his failure to provide for his family.
Still don't make enough money to take care of my family.
Exactly how and when Joe would return to social media was anybody's guess. As spring turned to summer, his Twitter feed continued the uneventful process of informing Karen from Philly, Ron Poliquin, and Hollywood Rob where he'd be performing. Joe Matarese was in a state of introspective flux. On one hand, he was finally free of internet trolls, but on the other, Joe came to a startling realisation. For 2 years, he was the recipient of the sort of attention, albeit negative, befitting of a much larger celebrity. And as a man suffering the perpetual weight of medicinal addiction, decision-making was not Joe's strong suit. He'd conclude that bad attention was better than no attention at all, and in Joe's signature stupefied haze, he returned to Twitter. Following months of voluntary exile, the anticipated reappearance of the aging pastophile to social media left many in a state of mild confusion. Joe's return saw him send 2 tweets, one at mentioning Chunky Junkie Artie Lang. In this first tweet on August 4th, 2018, Joe wrote, "After my #Delray Beach show last week with @mention Artie Quitter Sisters exact twin." Admittedly, a fairly harmless if a little blasé sentiment to share on Twitter, but it was the follow-up sent half an hour later that struck both his Twitter and Instagram followers as strange. In the post, Joe would confusingly emphasise how the girl was actually Artie Lang's exact duplicate. A reply to the tweet with the word exact would soon follow, rendering this entire interchange a frankly bewildering affair.
So what I'm pulling from this is that he was at a show, there was a girl in his mind that looked similar to Artie Lang's sister, somebody really none of us have ever seen. So he tweets about it twice, tagging Artie Lang, and then posted on Instagram. And I am just sitting here, and I'm like, So what?
It appeared as though the importance of such an observation was not well translated to his followers, although this could very well be the role of medication in Joe's reasoning for tweeting such inane drivel, something Mike David further elaborates on.
He's taking these Adderalls when he's doing these shows. He's getting so pilled up that everything that he thinks seems like a glorious moment at the time, as if he's got to share it with the world. Have you ever done Adderall? When that kicks in, log offline. Do not post anything to the public while that Adderall is kicking in, because you might say some really insane shit like this.
Either way, Joe was back on the pills and back on Twitter, sporting some sage advice for all you fellow dads out there. If your kids ever say, "Dad, I'm bored," drop everything you are doing and give 100% of yourself to make them happy. Never be a lazy dad. Period. This sentiment would accompany a 3-second video of Joe Matarese in sunglasses, repeating the word never.
Never.
This new positive self-help approach, presumably a tactic employed virtue of his new therapist, seemed to work well for the lobotomized house husband.
Joe telling you how to be a great parent is like Joe telling you how to run a great podcast. I mean,
Right.
like, we're talking about somebody that doesn't really have expertise in the field, who's telling everybody else how to do it.
Yeah, and the more you have to say you're so good at something, doesn't it usually indicate to everyone that you suck at it.
Another tweet on the 8th of August featured a longer video with folksy musical accompaniment, encouraging fathers not to do anything for themselves and instead punch in and dedicate your entire day to the whims of your child.
Don't do anything for yourself. Don't go play your guitar or turn your computer on. Just wake up and punch in like it's a job.
The empty platitudes continued a day later, with Joe even improving the production quality with text overlays. Today's Italian slice of medicated wisdom: don't say anything negative out loud.
Let's give you 2 little great tips for being a great dad. Okay, first one, and I've been really working on this hard and it's been really helping me, and you should try it. Don't say anything negative out loud around your kids.
A week later, Joe's stellar dad tips returned, this time with dietary recommendations. With the shades back on, the hashtag Dad of the Year irresponsibly suggests an adolescent diet of Dunkin' Donuts. This after reinforcing the need for parents to eat healthily.
This is what I have to get them. You can't eat that, all right? You cannot eat that. Make your own healthy food. You need the energy.
A succession of pictures and comments followed, each time using the hashtag Dad of the Year. The onslaught of meaningless recommendations ranged from the more big picture ideas such as surrounding yourself in positivity or leading by example, to even the small details such as installing a good bike rack. However, the reckless nature of Joe's advice would see him put his children in legitimate danger during a vacation at Martha's Vineyard. Having ignored 2 warning signs to keep from jumping off the bridge and into the water, Joe would instead film his son doing just that. The dumb fucktalian's tweet boasted of giving your kids lasting memories, in an act of total and utter negligence. As noted by Red Bar Radio host Mike David, Joe's intentions here are clear. The twice-failed podcaster craves engagement from a fan base, and given the unspoken off-limits nature of family when it comes to internet trolling, the Dad of the Year shtick ticks all of Joe's deranged boxes.
Maybe this dad, well, not even maybe, I mean, this is probably a no-duh. He's probably doing the dad thing, thinking that it's a harder thing to troll. Like, hey man, if they want to attempt trolling the positive dad stuff, they're the ones who are going to look like idiots, not me. You know, is he trying to attract a softer audience here? Is he trying to do these things thinking, nah, these trolls aren't going to come after kids? Kids are off limits.
A so far uneventful 2018 for the antiquated jokesmith would take a turn for the better following his desperate social media campaign of pestering more successful comedians. Sebastian Maniscalco, a wildly respected member of the stand-up community with a large and dedicated following, finally capitulated to Joe's shameless badgering. Maniscalco charitably allowed his fellow WOP comic to open for him during 5 of his East Coast shows, including one at Philadelphia's Wells Fargo Center. He would perform a 20-minute set to over 18,000 rabid Italians, representing an unprecedented peak in the career of Joe Matarese.
I gotta be honest, I'm fucking getting pumped. Look at this shit. Fucking Michael Jackson PYT playing.
And despite performing much of the same tired material as previously seen on his 2 Letterman appearances, Joe was generally well received by the mass of excitable Guidos. The crowd would simply lap up each of Joe's overindulgent Italianisms, and for the first time since America's Got Talent, Joe truly felt like he belonged.
Did you ever try to go to like San Diego and live there? You go to a Chargers game, there'll be people in the stands wearing the other jersey and just watching the game with their Viking shirt on. And I'm with friends going, why is no one throwing shit at them?
After 30 years in the business, Joe was convinced he had finally cracked some sort of code in pulling himself out of the dark pits of insignificance. Having seen his follower count explode to incalculable heights, the cultural pretender was keen to capitalize on this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. In one of his most peculiar car vlogs to date, Joe took valuable time away from his son's Little League game to rally his fresh flock of Italian followers.
What I need you guys to do, try to get more people to follow me. Pass my videos around. I'm gonna keep putting them out there. I'm cutting up sections of my 2 one-hour specials, okay?
The video culminated in a selfish Joe begging for more followers, claiming doing so would make a difference in getting the hopped-up narcissist to that next level.
I need you guys behind me. Do you believe in me? I feel like you do. I feel like we're kind of getting like family here. I feel like there's a connection. Get me as many followers as you can. That really will make a difference. I'm telling you, that's how I can get to that next level. Thank you. That's all I wanted to say today. Feel passionate.
This sudden bout of wide-eyed passion continued to envelop the comedian's Twitter feed. An energized Joe further tweeted how, "Your love for me is becoming contagious. Keep spreading your love for my comedy." Another car vlog accompanied the tweet, in yet another act of self-absorbed foolishness.
What do I want to say to you guys? I want to thank you. You guys seem to be spreading these videos for me. I really, really appreciate you guys. Keep posting this stuff every day. Keep spreading it. Keep spreading it. Keep spreading it. It is working. Keep spreading the videos. I love you.
With this sudden burst of positive attention from Sebastian's fan base, sending Joe into a visible frenzy, his behaviour on social media would cross some rather inappropriate lines. Having no doubt allowed this inevitably fleeting attention go to his head, it wasn't long before Joe was looking to Hollywood for answers as to the underrepresentation of Italians in show business. His first tweet pondered whether there would be more Italian comedians getting more famous if there were more Italians in the power positions in Hollywood. This anti-Semitic suggestion that Jews were responsible for some sort of nepotistic stranglehold on media and entertainment was additionally underlined by Joe, with the problematic statement that people naturally help their own. The toxic hole Joe was digging for himself further deepened, with a follow-up tweet explaining how he was sure this coincidence had been made public before, but I bet everyone is afraid to mention it because of how slanted it is. Joe's idiotic fumbling of Jewish taboos culminated in a final tweet claiming to have never pitched a show to someone whose family is from #Naples or the island of #Ischia, where my family is from off the coast of #Naples. This unfounded assumption that minus Semitic biases Joe might have a shot in Hollywood is perhaps the most ludicrous of assertions throughout the entire lore of Joe Matarese. Exactly why Joe would take on a cause as controversial as the Jewish question is anybody's guess. For comedians of higher stature, optics such as these would no doubt prompt waves of Zionist outrage from the Anti-Defamation League. Fortunately for Joe, his widespread irrelevance for once worked in his favour, as the tweets went by unnoticed.
Would there be more Italian comedians getting more famous if there were more Italians in power positions in Hollywood?
What the
Just asking, not accusing. I don't want to go on a I'm sorry tour. Curious what the public thinks. People naturally help their own, right?
Oh my God!
All right, yeah. So this is not a good show business strategy to, attack the Jews. But he kind of got away with it. Like he took them down.
Well, he took them down, and also no one gives a fuck what Joe tweets. Like you're not gonna go on an I'm sorry tour because you said you went on a tour with a Sebastian and you played 3 days. Like, yeah.
I think his apologies would just be his apology tour would be like a couple bar shows.
It would be another tweet saying, "Hey, I'm sorry for tweeting that earlier," which would have been a smart thing to tweet, but alas.
However, such nuance required an explaining himself to the fanatical mob of extreme leftism should these now deleted tweets resurface, would no doubt result in Joe being labelled the dreaded N-word.
So Joe is anti-Jew! He's a Nazi!
Insane.
He's a Nazi! That's what we gotta, you fucking Nazi, that's what I wanna see.
In Joe's defense, it's unlikely he harbors any ill feeling whatsoever towards the Jewish people. It appears these tweets were simply a thoughtless attempt at galvanizing pro-Italian support.
So, let me explain what's been happening. Since Joe opened for the Italian comedian Sebastian, Joe has been on an Italian kick, okay?
Undeterred, The meatball supremacist further doubled down on all things Italian, in possibly the weirdest in Matarese moments of all time. In yet another act of tranquilized madness, Joe had mistakenly uploaded an assortment of rough takes for his editor to cut down. A typical Mataresian blunder in the upload process resulted in the full video being made public, and 11 minutes of excruciating cringe was born. Joe's objective in producing this video was simple: to create a celebrity supergroup of Italian entertainers. And by forming what is essentially an Italian ethno-state separate from the wider world of stand-up comedy, Joe not only narrows the field of competition, but also boosts his celebrity profile by virtue of association. The biggest problem in this case is what's good for the agouche is certainly no good for the gander.
It is unbelievable how my social media has exploded, and it's almost all Italian people. So this is what I decided. I'm gonna start a super group of celebrity Italians to help me with this movement idea I have.
The video continued down its path of flustered bloopers and awkward pauses, giving a behind-the-scenes preview of Joe's distinctive creative process.
Right now, I just want to thank all the new. Right now, I want to thank all the new followers that I gained from opening up from. How did I fuck that up?
But it was the return of Joe's roster of bad Italian impressions that rendered this video an instant classic. Tony Soprano, Rocky Balboa, Danny Aiello, Ray Liotta and Sebastian Maniscalco would all feature in Joe Matarese's cavalcade of liquid shit.
Hey, farabla, fucking farabla. It's a fucking situation.
Joe's original intention was to cleverly edit these impressions to appear as though they were in conversation with him. But upon further inspection, something far more sinister was afoot. Potentially as a result of an overactive subconscious, Joe was using the impressions as a tool in revealing deep-seated fears the comedian was painfully wrestling with.
I'm a fucking old man. I don't say anything positive. I'm a negative Italian. You are a fucking loser. You listen to me now, Matarese, you sorry son of a bitch. You need to come up with something big, or you're gonna be fucking out of the business.
The line between the characters he'd portray and Joe's actual inner monologue continued to blur. Following his career-defining performance at the Wells Fargo Center, it could be argued that he had since felt a severe lack of appreciation or acknowledgement from Sebastian Maniscalco. In a possible overcompensation for this, Joe's impression of the comedian was littered with complimentary adulations and delusional suggestions of peerage. Why anybody would manufacture personalities for the sole purpose of granting themselves praise is a mystery even to me.
Matarese, great job, my man. You did unbelievable. Great job, Matarese. Way to go. It's like we were cut from the same cloth.
Elsewhere, following the release of this documentary's prequel An Inconvenient Goof, the spotlight on Joe's intoxicated capers was greater than ever before. With over 40,000 views since August 10th, 2018, the documentary has been seen by a far larger audience than Joe was otherwise accustomed to. And with mentions from comedians Nick Mullen, Jim Norton and Luis J. Gomez, Joe's back was planted firmly against the wall.
The O&A guys have been making documentaries about everybody. They made
What?
a mean one about Ant, and then they did one about Joe Matarese.
Joe Matarese, what?
But I'm sure Joe Matarese was fucking livid. He doesn't seem like the type of guy that deals with. Dude, it's pretty funny. It's pretty fucking. In fact, pull up the Joe Matarese documentary for a second. It's so good.
But you know what? He did one. I think he did one on Matarese. Like the bottom line is, he's funny. I can't say he's not funny. I would love to tell him it was terrible, but it wasn't.
I have to be honest. I did watch the Matarese one too.
Yeah,
it was very unkind and very hilarious.
It was funny.
Until now, he had selected to completely ignore the presence of the documentary, but following Sebastian Maniscalco's exposure to An Inconvenient Goof during an episode of SiriusXM's Pete and Sebastian show, in which both presenters assumed Joe had actually commissioned the documentary himself, the pressure on Joe to acknowledge its existence had finally broke him.
Joe Matarese is opening for you in September. You gotta ask him. I just saw something he posted. He made his own documentary about him. Did you see that, Lou?
No, I didn't.
Is that allowed? I've often wanted to make a documentary about myself, but I just thought I'm not allowed.
Wait a minute. Matarese made one about him?
Are we doing that now?
I mean, why not? If no one's going to make one for you, you got to make it yourself.
Well, Dean and Cola can be lost. I'm making one for myself if I'm firing up the cameras for anything.
It was around this time that Joe's affinity for live streaming behind the wheel would take increasingly dangerous turns, and with Joe's live stream chat a constant source of distraction for the agitated pill fiend, the fact he had yet to cause a serious accident is by all accounts a miracle. During one of these very streams on November 6th, 2018, Joe, his eyes frantically darting between his phone and side view mirror, finally addressed his pink elephant. He would first ask how many YouTube downloads the documentary was at, before suggesting a sequel with him in it.
How many downloads is my documentary up to that guy made? How many downloads is that up to? I'm curious. 40K? It's fucking amazing. I want him to do another one with me in it, like me being interviewed, like, 'cause he makes good documentaries, but then it's like, it's missing things and then it's unfactual. So I'm curious if that guy, he seems to see everything I do, so he's gonna see what I'm doing right now.
True to form, it wasn't long before Joe saw the monetary potential behind a second documentary. As a serial schemer, the opportunity to make up for his most recent failure in galvanizing momentum resulted in a generous Joe offering a humble portion of the second documentary's takings in exchange for doing all of the work.
You out there? Porcelain? You gotta do it the right way, though. You gotta do it with us involved. And then we sell it. And we give you a cut, Porcelain. You put the whole fucking thing together. There it is. There's a project for you, Porcelain.
After reconsidering whether a second documentary would be a good career move, Joe went back on the offensive, asking why somebody would even bother creating content without financial incentive.
I don't really know. I don't understand the point of making those docs. I mean, I guess it's cool that all the people, you know, all the downloads and all that, but like, what's the point? Does he want to make money off of those things? There's no money putting it on YouTube.
After briefly exchanging with the chat, Joe laughed off the suggestion of creating a documentary just to prove a point. But to assume content creators are simply wasting their time minus an economic motivator only underlines Joe's failures as an entertainer.
I know they're free. I get it. I'm just saying, it's a lot of fucking work for him. It's to prove a point? Can you imagine just doing a career to prove a point? I mean, I know it's not his career, but like, can you imagine just spending hours upon hours upon hours upon hours to just prove a point?
Ultimately, Joe's pitiful track record in attracting an online following affords the comedian very little room to criticise, and his indifferent dismissal of the documentary instead comes across as little more than some childishly petty mind game.
You make a new stand-up comedy special every 6 months, spending tens of thousands of your wife's dollars for 0 eyes, and you don't understand the point of Porcelain's documentaries. The things that are getting thousands and thousands of downloads and doing really well.
These are just some of the many memorable moments of Joe Matarese's 2018. They are, in part, what makes him such a fascinating case study of human behaviour. These moments exhibit a spectrum of wild impulses to say and do things most people eventually reason themselves out of. They showcase a veritable flurry of those impetuous overreactions that have occasionally tripped us all from time to time. On some level, Joe's tenacity and resolve, despite his foibles, could be applauded. After all, even if at a snail's pace, he's still pursuing his dream. But when the ever-growing internet lore surrounding you is consistently funnier and more entertaining than your career's intended outcome, maybe it's time to readjust.